Populism is on the rise across Europe. In this episode of Governance This Week, we take a look at why that is and how traditional parties can react to the success of populist parties. In the studio, we have Professor Tommaso Nannicini, who is a chair in political economy here at the UOI School of Transnational Governance, but also someone who has been in politics, was chief economic advisor of the Prime Minister, an undersecretary and a senator, but also someone who researches populism himself. Tommaso, welcome to the studio.
Hi, nice being here, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So in fact, in your research, Tommaso, you explore how traditional parties can fight populism on its own turf, right? So let's start maybe by looking at the main differences between traditional parties and populist parties and how they operate and interact with citizens.
Well, political scientists like to say that populist parties have a thin ideology. Thin because it's very simple in its structure. It's based on the idea that you have this dichotomy, this conflict between a corrupt establishment, a corrupt elite on one side, and the poor people on the other side. And of course, the corollary of this thin ideology is that only populist politicians can interpret the true will of the people. And by means of these communication strategies and by means of this also leadership based on a direct link, connection with potential voters without party structures or all those attributes that traditional parties have, populist politicians have been very successful in the last decades, and worldwide, but in Europe particularly.
So what are the root causes that you see in the rise of populism? Here in Italy, we have a government led by Giorgia Meloni's Boroughs of Italy party, but there's also, of course, success in other European countries. What is behind this?
Well, Italy has also been named the Silicon Valley of populism because, we have been very successful in fostering different strands of populism. Left wing with the Five Star Movement, right wing with Brothers of Italy or the Northern League, the League, no longer Northern, in the last few years. You have tons of studies pointing to different channels, to different explanations behind the rise of populism. Someone is pointing more to the economic roots of discontent, to the economic roots of populism, saying that because of austerity, because also of some policy mistakes of the European Union in the response to the financial crisis of 2008, populist parties had an easy way to build consensus because of economic because high rates of unemployment and economic discontent. You also have some other studies pointing to secularization and the other types of structural changes that are causing discontent because of a loss of identity, of social identity. The fact that some people feel like strangers in their own land, and this social, cultural discontent might be also one of the roots of populism. Whatever the reason, there is no doubt that traditional parties have failed in finding a successful way to rise to the challenge, to respond to the attack of populists.
To maybe quickly react to that, actually, you're of course Italian. Maybe the economic motive you talked about is maybe a strong one. Myself, I come originally from the Netherlands, where of course Geert Wilders and his party are doing very well, won the latest political elections, where maybe the economic factor is less of an issue, but it's more about that identity factor. So I guess across Europe there are different factors at play.
Yeah, for sure. You have a lot of heterogeneity based on different countries, but also on different regions. Also you may think also within the U.S. In the support to Trump, there is some heterogeneity in the causes. Depending on geography and the economics, the economic geography. Yeah.
Clear. So let's look a little bit about what are the main risks associated with populist parties in government.
Well, let me start from the benefits, not to sound like the old traditional elite members blaming the populists. I will come to that because I have some criticism to raise. But there is also a view according to which the rise of populist parties had some beneficial effect. The fact that some people who were, who considered themselves underrepresented in the political arena, who felt that their voices was not heard by politicians and by traditional representatives, now are going back to vote. So turnout, the increase in turnout has been seen as a benefit of the rise of populism. You have less, people are more attached to democracy and to the political game. So this is a pro, this is a benefit. Of course, on the other side, you have a lot of cons based on the fact that the very essence of populism, and that's also why sometimes populist politicians change their behavior once elected, once in power. But the very essence of this thin ideology represented by populism is that it's hard to keep together with liberal democracy as we interpret it. Because pluralism, the fact that you may have different views about economic policy, is not really into the populist idea. You just have one view, the right one, the people perspective. So pluralism, checks and balance, all these things which make our liberal democracy ideal strong and effective are really at odds with the populist view, and that's, on the dangerous side.
Yeah. So you did research on how traditional parties can react, right, to the success of populist parties, to find them on their own turf, so to say. So how did you go about this, and what were your findings?
Well, this was a randomized controlled trials. These, empirical methods by which social scientists randomized to different samples, which are equal ex ante before the intervention, but you administer to different sample different treatments. To borrow the term from the medical literature. And the treatments were different campaign ads. So basically, together with my colleagues at Bocconi University, Vincenzo Galasso, Massimo Morelli, and Piero Stanik, during the 2020 campaign for an Italian referendum about a constitutional reform cutting the members of parliament, the number of members of parliament, which was, by the way, a very populist-friendly issue, because was proposed by the two populist parties, the two main populist parties at the time, the Five Star Movement and the League, and also the campaign they were running was an anti-elite, anti-establishment campaign. So to us, it was the perfect testing ground to understand how in an electoral campaign involving a populist-friendly issue, how traditional parties can best respond to this challenge. And we basically implemented two different strategies. One was to give voters information about the side cost of the policy proposed by the populist parties, just cutting members of parliament. The other was more a campaign strategy of using the same weapons of populists, that is this blame attribution strategy. I mean, if you listen to a populist politician, the starting line is usually, I mean, all the blame is on the establishment, is on the old politicians. So we try to use the same campaign strategy, saying that basically all the blame was on populist politicians because they were just a new opportunistic elite using this referendum, using this issue just to fool people and to reinforce their power opportunistically. So these two strategies basically, which was a negative campaign against the populist campaign, reduced the support of in favor of the reform devised by the populist politicians. So it was effective, if you want. The first result of this experiment is that you can fight populist politicians on their own turf, and this aggressive campaign was effective in reducing their support by one channel, which was the reduction in turnout. So basically, this experiment just convinced a few people not to vote, some marginal voters. And the side cost of this is that we see that in the next election, actually, in treated municipalities, in those municipalities in which there was a reduced support for the old populists, there was an increase in the vote share of Brothers of Italy, the new right-wing populist party on the rise. So basically, the new populist in town got the final positive effect, the final win. So the positive effect for traditional parties was short-lived, was just temporary. This reduction in turnout in the immediate, immediately after the campaign.
Yeah, and you have, of course, also been in politics yourself, and what would you say to how can traditional parties actually do something about the success of populist parties without resorting to the exact same tactics? Like, are there other ways to successfully compete with populist parties?
Well, probably if I knew the response, I wouldn't be here. I would still be in politics. But based also on this experiment, on this study, showing that, using their same weapons is counterproductive in the medium run, because you are just helping some new populist supply in the political market. I think that the response is a long-term one. You need to build on output legitimacy, to give people lives, positive solutions, so inclusive policy making, and have also a positive narrative about the potential of democratic governments at the national and the transnational level. That's a key challenge for the European Union, because there are problems that we can just solve as Europeans. But we keep saying that, we have been saying that for a while now. So we should solve those problems, reinforcing the European Union and the capacity of the European Union to solve those problems. I think that would be the best solution to populism. And the second one, you should invest on political organizations which are stable, inclusive, and can bring this positive narrative to the people. Otherwise, populists will always have a comparative advantage in mobilizing the less represented portion of the electorate.
I think that's an excellent concluding thought on this topic for now. We will keep an eye on developments in populism in 2024, and we'll be happy, of course, to have you back on this or another topic in the near future. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
To our viewers, thanks for joining another episode of Governance This Week. If you haven't done so yet, don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.